Welcome to Social Enterprise Summit 2020 International Symposium. Thank you for joining this session, Building Education Transformation Movement, under the track of Education Innovation. I'm your facilitator today, Marco Scheck from Social Innovation Exchange. Social Innovation Exchange is an organization that promotes innovation and social change among innovators from around the world. We believe in insight gathering, partnership, and also mutual learning. So today we are very, very happy to have three speakers to talk about education innovation. Education is to me, is one of the key that promote social change. That is very aligned with what we have been advocating in Social Enterprise Summit, how to create a better future for our future generation. So we are living in a increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. So in the past year, because of COVID-19, there are so many disruptions to our current education system, and educators are kind of forced to change or innovate. So in view of that, in the future, how can we continue this momentum to create an enabling environment for our students, for our future generation to cope with these changes? So this session, we are very happy to have invited speakers from around the world, from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, and also UK and globally, sharing their experience on how they drive education transformation movement from their own domain and their perspective. So may I now introduce a little bit the three speakers. Firstly, we have Tracy Chen from Innovators. So she's one of the founding members of Innovators, a charity in Hong Kong that promotes social innovation and also education innovation in the school setting and mostly in primary and secondary school. We do a lot of education innovators training. So I will leave Tracy to talk a little bit more later on what Innovators work is about. She is also very passionate about how we can learn from our overseas partner. So we have convened a lot of exchange sessions. So welcome, Tracy.
Thank you, Marco. And thanks for everyone for joining the session.
Yeah, so we have another panelist, which is from Taiwan, OC from Taiwan. He's the founder of VUCA and also CEO of OZ Branding and Curating. So OZ is very busy now because he's preparing for his expo tomorrow, which I welcome everyone to go online and search for the expo, which convene a lot of education innovators in Taiwan and from the Chinese-speaking world to share the experimentation. And OZ used a very special angle using art, creativity to drive the movement. He will definitely share a little bit more later. So welcome, OZ.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, join us.
Yeah. So last but not least, we have Valerie Hannon from UK joining us very early. She is one of the thought leaders in the education field. She's the co-founder of Innovation Unit in UK and a founding member and co-chair of Global Education Leaders Partnership. So hi, Valerie, thank you for joining us. So she is a really inspiring speaker talking about how do we change the systems to rethink what success means to our future generation. And she has been involved in a lot of international work in driving education innovation in Asia, in Europe, and in UK, of course. So she'll share a lot more on her perspective on the future generation, on how educators should embrace what attitudes and the system that we are foreseeing and the vision that we see in the future. So these are all speakers today sharing their insight. So may I now invite Tracy from Innovators to talk a little bit about your work, your contacts, to share with the audience from around the world now. What are the contacts in Hong Kong now, and what are your work is about? Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Marco. So I'm from Innovators, a charity founded by educators and social entrepreneurs in Hong Kong 5 years ago. When we talk about education and transformation in education, We think education is always about people. So investing in people is the best way to build the education that we want to see. We hope to build the education that can trust the students, support learners with agency and autonomy, recognize diverse learning options, and also has broader definition of success. So we have been taking the role as a catalyst and also facilitator to transform education through empowering teachers as innovators. I think particularly at the time of COVID, we also see how teachers have to quickly adjust themselves and respond to the changes. And we hope to enable teachers to have different perspectives on education and also take actions to realize the many possibilities in education. That's the best way to change. And we also encourage cross-sector collaboration to support their innovations in schools, and that's very important. Now we mainly work with teachers in primary and secondary schools. These teachers work closely with the students at the front line, so they can always observe their evolving needs. They know what to do to better respond to the needs of the students and also facilitate their holistic growth at different learning stages. There is the impression that education in Hong Kong is quite examination and result oriented, but I think we also have a strength in our Hong Kong policy because we have the school-based management policy in our schools. It actually gives space and flexibility for schools to design on their own teaching and learning under a big framework. And the school management and also the teachers can also plan for continuous development and improvement. And we see this is where the opportunities come. And so we support the teachers to make changes through building their innovation capacity. Teachers, they are facilitators, but they are also designers and innovators. So we bring more cross-sector exposure to the teachers so they can better understand how the development in society affects the now and the future of the young generation. We also hope teachers to learn to become empathetic leaders who can create a new and shared vision on learning with their teaching team, who are also a learning team and also innovation team. The teacher leaders also explore ways to combine their passion and their professional knowledge to co-create new practice and process in teaching and learning. Sometimes it really takes a lot of courage to break through the procedural and system barriers to develop what they want for the students. And we also spend a lot of efforts to incubate the new ideas of the teachers. The ideas can be about the new design of curriculum, pedagogies, assessment, or designing learning experience or learning environment that is more dynamic and authentic for the students. And with
I think there might be some technical difficulties from Tracy, but on innovators' behalf, I can share a little bit more since I understand a little bit more about their organization. So we see teachers as leaders. We believe
ways about how we can facilitate the learning of students. And we really encourage experimentation and also encourage the teachers to not just think out of the box, but also take practical actions to test and try out new approach. And we reflect along the journey and also see what works and what doesn't work. And of course, it's also very important for the innovators to come together to have peer learning and sharing. To share not just only the good practice, but also even the failures, the reflection, the insights along the change-making journey. Some of the teachers, they have been promoted to leadership and management roles, and they can further contribute to create influence and also to invite their peers to join the movement. And there are about 57,000 primary and secondary school teachers in Hong Kong working in 1,000 primary and secondary schools. And up to now, in the past 5 years, we have supported teaching teams from around 60 schools. So that is about 6% of schools in Hong Kong. We think this is really just a first step, small steps. And we hope we'll continue to work with the teachers and also the schools and also the teacher innovators community to share experience and support each other. And we hope like through this, at some point, we are going to reach the tipping point and also to have more power and to get a significant crowd together to really transform education. So to summarize, we think empowering the teachers and also encouraging cross-sector collaboration to support innovation in schools. It's the way to transform education step by step.
Thank
Thank you.
Tracy. I think, yeah, it's really important because educators at the front line, teachers, we believe in their professionalism. We believe in that intelligence. Like, how do we empower them is innovators' perspective of driving education transformation in Hong Kong. So thanks, Tracy, for sharing a little bit about your work. So move on, I will invite our regional friend, OC from Taiwan. You a little bit different role or different angle in encouraging education transformation in your context. Can you share a little bit to the audience a little bit about the context in Taiwan and your vision and your approach? Ozzy, over to you.
Thank you. Zashir is from 2014, and in Taiwan, 2014, there's a very big social movement. And Zashir is the biggest platform and festival for education innovators. I invite all the people, if you're doing some new innovative education, you can join this festival. So every time I think, if we want to change something, you know, a small group of people just talking about this is not gonna change. You should communicate with the society. So many people can participate in the movement, and they are knowing what you are doing, and they join you and connected to you. So I using the interesting way. I made a very big festival, and it's happy, it's having fun, and the education innovators is from like school teachers and startup and some social innovators, some parents, some creative guys. They want to change education. You can join us and become speakers. So at the past 6 years, we gathering more than like 2,000, I call it change makers. You got a brand, you got a school, you got an alternative school or experimental school. And people go together and they having fun and talk to each other, make friends and doing new stuff, creative things, and using design and invite the young people join us. So education issues is not only the, our professionals. It should be in the society. Everyone should participate in, because I think if our mind, our knowledge, I think everyone change our mind and that thing would be changed. If the parents think, passing the test is not a really important things. Finding your passion is most important things. All the parents think that way. The government will not, having this one-way value, education system. So 6 years, we have a very big impact to government, because, government people need election. Okay, many people join this, so we gathering like more than 30,000 people buying tickets to our festival. So government, wow, this is so big. It's a very big movement. So they invite us or they participate in, and they see what, if they are doing good, we don't have to, host a festival like this, host a movement like this. So we do a lot of communication with government, with the university, with a lot of innovators, change makers. So it's kind of movement. And this year we're using the online way, gathering all the change makers. So I think, summarize it, I think I'm using a fun, interesting way to communicate with the society, to young people, to the future parents, the future teachers, or the future governmentists. So I think we should have the new way to solve our problem. So this is my new way. This is what Zashir do. Okay, thank you, Marco.
Thanks, Ozzy. I think it's really important about you are using like communication and make sure the visibility of the education alternatives being seen instead of just hiding between four walls. And I think you act as a bridge and intermediary between the public and maybe the institutions. How do we communicate that? And you use a really fun and creative way. Every year when I saw the key visuals from Zashir, I think it's really interesting, and it really make outsiders, maybe they're not from education primarily, but they will feel like interested to join in. So it's really, really good to know that you use this angle to intervene. Thanks, Ozzy, again. So last but not least, I would like to invite Valerie from Innovation Unit and also Global Education Leaders Partnership to share a little bit her insight. Along the years, how did you drive education transformation from around the world? And what are your food for thoughts for everyone who are driving innovation in education sector today? So over to you, Valerie.
Well, thank you, Marco, and thanks to the summit for inviting me to share my perspectives on this. I welcome the opportunity to do it. I am based in London, as you can hear, and I am going to give you a little bit about the history of my involvement in this work as a lifelong educator, teacher, director of education, worked in the ministry. But I'm in London currently. However, my work is international, so I'm in a very fortunate position, I think, to give a bit of an international perspective on what is happening around this movement towards transformation, how it's accelerating, how it's getting blocked, and, if you like, where I've come to in my own work around the theory of change as to what we now need. So very nearly 20 years ago, I was working at that stage with Ken Robinson on the whole issue of around creativity. And that was a very exciting time in many ways. I want to tie up what I have to say with politics, because I do actually believe that this is deeply intertwined with politics. And at that stage in England, there was a Labour government, and I was invited to, alongside others, to found an innovation unit, which actually was within government. And the idea, Tracy, was to empower practitioners with new kinds of skills and approaches to lead innovation in their schools. Sounds like a great idea. Yeah, let's go for it. And so we founded Innovation Unit. In a very short space of time, we found out that the worst thing to do is to put such a unit inside government, for a whole range of reasons we don't have time to talk about, but it's a really bad idea. So we floated off. We became a little social enterprise out there in the big wide world trying to find our own way, and not for profit, but still, we had to get contracts and work with other agencies to survive. And I'm pleased to say the organization is still thriving. And our plan, exactly as you've been describing, Tracy, so beautifully, was to work with grassroots teachers and leaders to build their capacity, to grow a skill set around how to effect change. At that stage, our emphasis was still on innovation. And I don't often use the term innovation now very much, actually, because I think that what we are looking at is transformation. And I'm going to say a bit about that in a moment. By the way, having founded it and worked with it and for it, I now no longer do that. I'm a trustee, I'm a board member, but fundamentally my work is as an independent thought leader. But Innovation Unit's an interesting case history because, yes, it floated off, it became independent, it started working in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, across the world with a grassroots movement, Aussie being the important word, of educators who really did want to have a different set of methods, a different relationship with family, a different relationship with learners. And they wanted the skills to become, as you said, Tracy, designers of learning, choreographers of learning, bringing much more creativity to the piece. And the attempt was to help them do that. So Innovation Unit has carried on with that work, and by the way, diversified into other forms of innovation, but I'll leave that to one side. I want to move directly to my own observations now about how far that kind of model can go and some of its limitations, because frankly, I've come to the point where I recognize that it is extremely limited. And I'm very interested in what you said, Ozzy, about trying to widen the scope of its movements in different ways. So firstly, my starting point is that we need transformation. And we've got to really understand what that means. We're talking about something at system level. It's not enough to see lots of beautiful exceptions around the world. We need those beautiful exceptions and we need to learn from them and really shine a spotlight on them because they show what can be done. But that's only one part of it. So working on innovators within schools, the grassroots movement, is, if you like, the supply side. But we need to grow the demand side. And the demand side is ensuring that learners themselves, the kids who were out there on climate strikes and were saying, my education is irrelevant to what's happening in the world. We need something very different to equip us for, as you said, Marco, a VUCA world. Those learners need to be part of the movement, but families need to be part of the movement. Parents need to be saying, hey, I want something different for my kid. And it may be that COVID has been of assistance in that because many of them have had, as it like, a look under the hood, a look under the bonnet of what's going on in schools and saying, seriously? Is that what's supposed to be exciting, my kid? I don't think so. So enabling parents to become part of a movement and demanding something different as well. So you've got supply, you've got demand, but you've also got regulatory systems. And this is where I suppose my theory of change becomes quite problematic because we need to prosecute a case for change, which is so compelling that governments recognize they need to change their regulatory frameworks as well. We cannot leave politics out of this because otherwise I will tell you from deep experience that we end up with very frustrated educators. And I've seen this in so many jurisdictions. Educators who want to do differently, who do have a different perspective on what counts as success, as you said, Tracy, and my own effort has been to try to redefine success by publishing books like Thrive and saying, hey, what do we mean by being successful in this world of ours? Well, teachers can become convinced of that, but if they work within systems where the whole accountability system, the examination system, what is valued, which is usually cognitive, access to the best universities. And, 50% of the population doesn't really matter because they don't get to university. And what's the whole cognitive framework is completely dominant. If that is what governments resource and fund and assess and say is important, then you just have a recipe for huge, huge frustration, I think. So we need a theory of change, in my view, which starts with a conversation about different purposes for education. And it needs to be a really big public conversation, preferably involving more and more politicians about what really counts, what is important in our societies. I would want to say at the top of the list would be creating humans who are capable of solving the planetary emergency, both the climate emergency and the biodiversity emergency around extinction. Because without solving those two, we are toast. We are over as a species. And unless you get that right at the top of your order of priorities, then if you're still talking GDP and growth, frankly, you know, you might as well be in the 18th century. And so many governments still predicate their entire education system on notions, sometimes not very explicit, but they're there, they're buried, about GDP and growth. And that is an entirely destructive approach. We need to be changing the conversation to be talking about what it is to thrive in the new century, in this 21st century of ours. So, to finish my input, we need to do the work with the grassroots, hugely important. They need the new tools of design thinking, of prototyping, of experimentation. We need to shine a big spotlight on the success stories around the world, schools that are doing this. So my new book is called The Future Schools, which is a future scan, and it's a scan of across the world, schools who are really doing this with fantastic success. But they are the beautiful exceptions. They are not systems. And we also need to build the public will for change. And I think that's part of the work that Aussie is doing, which is around building the public will, building demand from parents, demand from learners about something different. And we need to change the political conversation, which after all determines where the huge resources of the state go into regulating, determining what gets assessed, towards a different paradigm in which we assess very differently. We use portfolios, we use recognition of learning, we value heart, head, and hand. And we don't just say that the cognitive is completely superordinate to everything else. And it may be, I'm not sure yet, I hope, that COVID can help us in some of that task. But we should not underestimate, I think, the extent to which many people just want to snap back to the way things were. They want their old lives back. And so overcoming that, I think, is a difficulty, but I think that's the task that we need to do. And I can't finish my contribution without saying that in Hong Kong in particular, the elephant in the room, surely, is what is going on at the societal level with the national security law. And everything I read about Hong Kong is telling me about how educators are extremely frightened and uncertain and insecure about what it is they now may do within classrooms. How can we not discuss that elephant in the room? So thank you so much for giving me the time to put in my insights, and I'm very happy to join in the conversation.
Thank you, Valerie. Yeah, I completely agree with you. When we want to achieve system change, actually, I got goosebumps when you just talk about the last part. Yeah, it's not easy for Hong Kong context to drive change, and I completely agree with you. Actually, when we talk about transformation, it is tie with politics a lot. And how do we engage the public to talk more, to really have that cultural shift on the mindset of how do we define success? How do we think about the future generation should embrace? What are the values? What are the vision that we are seeing? And I think that is really important. At Innovators, I'm sure Tracy is working with a lot of teachers on reshaping their values, or not reshaping their values, but finding values that we all educators embrace for the future and also for the future generation. And that is something that really important even in times of crisis. How do we look inward and really gather together and as a crowd to really rethink and restructure how we think about future. So thank you for the input, Valerie, and thank you, Tracy and Aussie again. So before we jump into discussion, I would like to invite questions from the audience. And you can type in your questions in the Q&A boxes, and I will read it out from my iPad here, and we'll answer it live on this panel discussion. So please give us as much questions as we can, because we value this kind of exchange. So let's jump into discussion. So what I see is Tracy use educators working with teachers as leaders, and also bridging the public and institution, building the public consent. And Valerie, your input is like on a system level. How do we really think about our theory of change and really get things together, shifting the whole dialogue and conversation? So we, of course, in the past like 10 months from around the world, I think in Hong Kong, in UK, in US, or from all around the world, COVID really disrupt the whole education sector, from school-based learning to home learning. And like Valerie said, parents start noticing, oh, is this what you learn at school? It's this how you learn, and they're like shocked, and everyone is connected in this scene. For example, parents in Hong Kong, they have to work from home, but at the same time, they have to take care of their child, taking Zoom lessons. So they realize, oh, this is something that how they learn. And so with this backdrop, what do you think is the emerging needs of educators in the future, that how do we don't snap back to the old practice, but really think forward? What should we continue the momentum? Do you have any thoughts on like what are the emerging needs or skills that education leaders or educators should embrace? Tracy, Ozzy, or Valerie, feel free to chip in your ideas.
Tracy, go first, because in Taiwan, you know, we live the same way before COVID-19, so that's why I'm worried about, you know, we have no reason to transforming. We, you know, it's just like nothing happened in Taiwan. So maybe you guys first.
I would say that's a happy problem. Like
yes, that's a blessing actually.
Yeah, but I don't think it in long term. I don't think it's a good thing for education. Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe Tracy can share a little bit about your observation.
From our observation, we think first thing, very important thing is that we have to create more space for educators to really listen to the young generation. I mean, sometimes like teachers are really busy. Like teachers in Hong Kong, they have to take care of the teaching and also a lot of administrative work. And sometimes it's very like work driven and work focused. But we cannot forget that education is always about our students, and they are like people with feelings, with their own preference, with their own ways of learning. And we have heard stories from teachers in Hong Kong saying that because when the students have to stay at home and they didn't need to teach for all day, there's actually a little bit more time to have casual conversation with students. And so they observe that students can actually have the self-directed learning ability. Like maybe like one student, they used to like be really disengaged in class, because in a class with like 30 students, teachers just cannot take care of everyone. So they have to keep up with the pacing of the curriculum. But then when students have more time, they can really pace their learning by themselves. So the seemingly disengaged students in the classroom suddenly become really motivated students at home, because they can choose the apps that they want to use for learning. They can choose the ways that they prefer. They listen to songs, they watch documentaries, and they learn in a ways that that can really aligns with their learning needs and pace at that time. So I think one important element is that how we can create opportunities for more dialogue and for students to be listened, and for students to really voice out what kind of learning they prefer, how the young generation learn now, particularly with the development of technology, and they are really like tech enabled learning process. And I think this is this is important in a way that teachers have to always understand the learning of the young generation now is different from how we learned in the past. So we also have to learn from the students.
Yeah, I think being reflective as educators nowadays is really important, like how to reflect their teaching and learning experience, how they deliver classes. With COVID, you can never do it again like the past. So how do we really listen to the students and observe in a way that they change how they teach in the future, or how do they sustain the momentum on the experiments they have been doing? So Valerie, do you have some insight or some suggestions on educators on like how to sustain the momentum? Like, of course, some of them might want to go back to the old way, but how would you suggest them to move forward? Like, don't look back. Like, yeah, what's your
well, as far as COVID is concerned, I have to say that yes, it has been an accelerator for innovative methods, but primarily around the use of technology itself. And that's just but one dimension. I mean, if you want to say what are the big shifts in terms of the paradigm of learning and teaching, I would say, and Tracy's touching on this, but it goes deeper, is the transfer of focus and power actually from the teacher to the learner. And so if you like, the old 20th century model was very teacher-centric. The teacher determines the curriculum, determines the pace of learning. It's one size fits all. The teacher's at the center. The teacher does most of the talking, and so on and so forth. The 21st century model is where that's flipped. And as Tracy already referred to earlier, the teacher becomes much more of a facilitator, a choreographer of learning, and the learner becomes much more in charge of her learning journey. Now, in some circumstances, a learner is much more empowered actually to think about the shape of the curriculum. And it's not just how and when she accesses the curriculum, which is already set by somebody else, but is actually a much more fluid thing. So I don't particularly want to spend too much time on COVID, but I think that the shift that we're talking about here is one which goes bigger than that kind of amendment. If you ask me what was the biggest powerful change in teaching and learning that I've observed, it is the shift towards project-based learning and moving away from subject-focused disciplines in their silos, taught by subject specialists who know everything and whose job is to transfer what they know to somebody else, to forms of learning which are relevant, which are increasingly real world, which are increasingly interdisciplinary. And that requires a very different and very sophisticated skill set from teachers. And the most empowering changes I've seen for teachers is when they become skilled in project-based learning and bring their subject discipline expertise to a piece of work which as students can see as relevant to their own community, their own society. It matters. We used to call it, in short, work that matters. So it's not work that matters because you get a grade or you get a high mark. It's because it matters to people. It matters to you. And, you know, pretty young kids can get involved in project-based learning. So if I had to point to one piece of pedagogic change that was powerful, I would say the incorporation of project-based learning into other forms as well. It's not the silver bullet, you know, doesn't solve everything. But as a single shift, if I wanted to see a school that my kids or my grandkids went to change, I'd say, let's make me confident that the teachers in that school can pursue project-based learning.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have that kind of relevancy to make sure the students' learning is relevant to the real world, and the authenticity on how do we design a framework or enabling environment for the students to learn themselves. We are not just delivering information, but also creating the framework, creating an environment. Let's say we'll create a form, but in a farm, people like students can learn about biology. They can learn how to take care of a plant. They learn about life education. There are a lot, like how do we design a learning space and learning environment? And that is something really important. As educator nowadays, like how do we shift from teacher-centric to student-centric? And it's not easy from our experience, from Tracy experience, I'm sure. It's not easy to really shift the mindset of an educator from a teacher-centric to student-centric, but it takes time, like to do more experimentation. So there are some questions from the crowd. Maybe I'll read out some of them. So Kenneth asks, like in the context of Hong Kong, especially there are a lot of traditional elite school focuses on academic merits, and what would be the effective strategies to enable teachers to drive innovative change or transformation? From maybe I'll direct these questions to Valerie. Of course, we talk a lot about like system change. So in context of Hong Kong, or I'm sure actually in UK, it's very similar because our system is like basically referencing what UK has been doing in the past. So do you have any like thoughts or strategies that you suggest to incentivize the school leaders or teachers to make these kind of changes? Is it just by changing the whole assessment curriculum or assessment methods will do, or like what other ways that from your experience?
Okay, well, the first thing I'd say is stop taking any account of what goes on in the UK. Forget it, you know. I happen to live here, but it's the last place I work because this thing is so tied up with politics. And we now have a right-wing government with old-style retrogressive views about curriculum and what learning is for, and it's fundamentally an elitist view. And, you know, they don't take part in any debates at all, really. So everything about the system is a very, very problematic set of circumstances at the moment. I'm trying to work on that, but I would not recommend anyone to emulate it. Point one. Point two, if you take Hong Kong, you're not talking about one system, you're talking about several. So you've got the private system, the questioner called it the elitist schools, and that's a marketplace. So parents with resources buy that in a marketplace, and they are choosing a good, a purchased good, which they assess for their kids will give their kid the best advantage. Now, my experience in my research over the last 8 months has been around the future school. And what I'm seeing around the world is wealthier, discerning parents recognizing that what their kids will want for the future is not the old style academic test, get into the, you know, the Ivy League schools, but actually a much broader set of competencies, skills around collaboration and authenticity that are very different from the kinds of things that the elite schools used to peddle in the past. So I'm not the one to advise people working in elite schools themselves, but they will be sensitive to their markets. And I think that their market is changing because I think that discerning wealthier parents recognize that, yeah, the Ivy League universities confer a certain set of advantages, but actually we are talking about a mental health epidemic amongst our young people of depression and stress and lack of purpose. And they know increasingly that actually what they need to be doing in terms of schooling education is to give their kids a really powerful basis of personal identity, personal meaning, personal security, as well as academic skill and collaborative skill and creativity, which new schools are starting to create. And I call them the beautiful exceptions. Studio schools around the world are starting to offer this. And my worry is that there'll be a huge kind of apartheid between those schools who are powering ahead with that paradigm and the state school systems, which are kind of in the slow lane, glacial progress there. So my worry, as I've said to Tracy and to Ozzy, is that teachers working in those schools will start to attain the skills which you are very busy giving them, but that they will experience huge frustration if we don't start to change the public conversation about what education has to be for.
Thanks, Valerie. So talk about public like conversation. Ozzy, you did a lot on this in Taiwan or in the Chinese-speaking world. So can you share a little bit your experience in curating all these conversations? And do you think, like other than this, like what are you guys doing to really shift the system? Of course, the start of 杂学 is because of a social movement. After the social movement, it all started and accelerated. So can you tell us a little bit on how do you promote these success stories and really like parting into the system and create change in your context?
Okay. I think I'm good at marketing and make the virus topic issues. So I'm using the design way, and it's not like education type way. Education is kind of more serious, and I'm using the funny way. So let people curious about what is it. The first year of 杂学 called Naughty Education Festival. Naughty. So people will say, what? Naughty education? I'm using, it's like a funnel, like getting people get interested in and pay the tickets inside and get connected with the, change makers. So, but in Taiwan, I'm different. I'm in a different situation now. I'm like the only one say, okay, we should shift to the different like online, like digital, like different. No one cares about, they are living in the same way. So I think it's a pity. Like I think COVID gave us a very good timing and chance to change the whole stuff, and we're missing the chance. This year I'm doing the expo online. I'm the only one online expo in Taiwan. It's kind of weird, but I think in the future, every teacher should be like a curator. How to say that? Like make things interesting and gathering the message and put together and like facilitate everyone to working on it and inspire them. And the other way, I think online merge offline maybe is the way that the education will try to become different way, different things. Because I'm doing the VR stuff. I know the VR can do a lot of things like body experience, and there are a lot of things. Technology is changing our life. Technology should be change education, but we're missing the transformation in Taiwan because everyone, just few people just want to push the public, the policy, want to change it. All our change maker and government people say they are depressed to, there's some new policy. And the COVID-19 coming, they are happy, like, okay, we have chance to, put the policy to the creative way or to the school, to the citizen, but we don't. So I'm trying to, make the movement now, like, okay, we should chase on the, other country, like you are like in a very big digital transformation, the whole people, the population. But in Taiwan, I'm kind of worried about we stay satisfied and don't have reason to change. And so this year I put it online, and later I will get a lot of movement like, okay, we should going forward, not stay here.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Lucy. I think Taiwan is a good case stories when we talk about like COVID control and everything. But from your input, like seems like the crisis doesn't really impact Taiwan. So that's why there's a missing chance for the educators in Taiwan to really embrace or catch up with the world in the acceleration of digitalization. So maybe I'll go to Tracy. When we talk, at Innovators, we talk a lot about cross-sector collaboration, and we talk a lot about like authentic learning. So what do you see? There are some examples from educators in Hong Kong are really embracing that. Can you share one story that educators in Hong Kong that give us some hope that really they're trying to do something different, experimenting something different in the past few years that you observe when you do your work, and how do they deliver it? And then, yeah, maybe we can share a little bit to our audience on one case stories. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. I think I echo what Valerie just mentioned. One types of like change that we see in Hong Kong is that the teachers reflect more on what is really like meaningful education for the students. And because a lot of teachers in Hong Kong would think students are not motivated, they are not engaged in learning. And when we ask the students, they would usually say they don't see the meaning of what they learn. They don't know how it is relevant to their life, and they don't see like they can really like contribute or learn it and then make something happen and then be a useful person or like contribute to something meaningful. And so the teachers in Hong Kong, they're trying to like create ways to really break through the subject barriers and support cross-disciplinary learning, and also facilitate students to learn through doing projects. There's a school, secondary school in Hong Kong. In the past 3 years, I think they have developed a project-based learning curriculum starting from secondary 1, and now it's in all the junior form from form 1 to form 3. So the students are formed into groups, and they have to go through the design thinking process, and they also identify the issues that people around are facing, or the teachers would bring the students to the community, interview people in the community and ask them like what kind of issues like you are facing in your life. And also they would design the journey and give a lot of facilitation to the students to reflect and to see like students if they can come up with some ideas and to solve the problems or respond to the issues. And the students, they don't just like work on presentations and do the PowerPoint and then share about the ideas in the classroom. They really have to make something. I mean, they really have to like do the prototype and also maybe design the solutions and use their hands to really like make that tools for real, and then bring the tools back to the people in the community and ask them to try to use it and get their feedback and how they can improve it. So it's an ongoing process, and we see the students, they can really like integrate their learning and also see the meaning of like why they have to get specific areas of knowledge. And I think the beauty in it is that the students usually have more space to also merge their passion, what they care about, with the solutions that they want to bring to the users. So I think it's important to create authentic experience for the students, and they really like start working on something real instead of listening to the experience of the other people.
Thank you, Tracy. I think actually more and more schools are starting in Hong Kong, like embracing this kind of mindset. So there's one question direct to Valerie. Of course, like we definitely talk about changing the theory of change, and Ivy said she can imagine the government has its own fear and hope to have some certainty and control. So she would like to hear some success stories that maybe you have heard of or you have worked on, like how others have done to transform education in a relatively psychologically not so safe environment. Do you have one like story can share with us from your experience?
Yeah, I will. Thank you for the question. Just a very quick one, though, just on what Tracy said. I thought it was beautiful and spot on. I couldn't agree more. My experience, though, is that that kind of work flourishes very often in the early secondary years. And then as soon as the school has to start preparing students for an exam system, they drop it. And so I have worked with systems so hugely frustrated by the fact that they do this beautiful project-based work. They start to really grow the skills of collaboration and using many sources and becoming an ecosystem for learning. And then suddenly they're up against the assessment system where schools know they have to prepare students to pass exams, and they drop it. And so I just want to point out that again and again, you come back to what the system requires, and to have an alignment between system expectations and the kinds of expertise and values that Tracy's just been setting out. Because if you don't do it, you get a recipe for frustration. Now, that brings me to answering your question, Marco. And one of the more well, I think there's two areas of the world that I've been really inspired by working with over the last few years. One is New Zealand, where an incoming government decided, guess what? That they would have a big conversation about what education is for. And they ran a series of summits, which particularly involved excluded people like Maori and others who had not benefited from the education system, but many other leaders, business leaders, community leaders, asking, what is education for? What are we trying to do here? You know, and in my language, going back to my book, what is it to thrive? What do you actually mean by thriving now? Because it doesn't mean the same now as it did 50 years ago. And so to have that big conversation around the purpose of education enables a lot of things to flow, actually. And the other area where I think I've observed that happening in a much more productive way is British Columbia in Canada, where they have taken a really highly collaborative approach to changing the curriculum, a curriculum which is based on concepts and knowledge and competency. So competency is a really, really important idea. The idea of the competency is not that you just teach knowledge or that you just teach skills, or that there's the old tired debate about is it knowledge or is it skills, but a competency is four things. It's a basket of four things: knowledge and skills and values and attitudes. And so the conversation that British Columbia had, which I did find inspiring actually, involves people talking about what are the competencies, knowledge, skills, values and attitudes that we think are really important for our province in the new century. And I think that what came out of that was a curriculum which is a really enabling curriculum, and they're now working on forms of assessment that reflect their values.
Thank you, Valerie. It's really inspiring to hear like how do we have the conversation on the purpose of education, and it's really important to have that kind of consensus from across sector. So last questions before we end this. I think we need like an hour more or a day more to talk about this. But last question is, are you hopeful for the future in driving education transformation? Like all three of you, one sentence, are you hopeful and why? And we'll end the sessions. Maybe Tracy first.
I would say we have to remain hopeful because we still have our young generation and they are our hope in the future. So we keep the hope and we also pass on the hope to the young people And no matter how the environment has changed, we have always focused our eyes on the young kids and the youth, because that's what we are here for. It's always for the young people. Yeah.
Thank you. OC?
My answer is yes. I believe in, we should, but it's consistent. We should like chasing, moving, become change, and next generation will, fighting us, they will change. So it's going on. It's like
Cycle.
Yeah. So I'm hopefully I'm doing this for my whole life. Yeah.
Thanks, OC. Valerie?
I was cursed at birth with a pessimistic personality. That's the truth. But as Tracy said, you have to be hopeful, because actually despair is the alternative, and that is not an option. The truth is, I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime, but I pray that my grandchildren will.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, let's stay hopeful even in times of crisis and difficulties. So here comes to an end of the session. Thank you again for all the speakers as they've shared much of their experience in the field. Please take a few minutes to help us fill in the survey, which is already placed at the chat room, or scan the QR code on the screen. So your feedback is extremely useful for us to evaluate the summit and make it even better in the coming years. So last but not least, if you have finished the survey, please return to the agenda page to join other sessions. Thanks again, Tracy, Ozzy, and Valerie, to share your experience. And I'm sure in the future, we'll cross paths again and we'll have much more collaboration to come. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.